Hi, I'm Harsha Wijayawardhana. Today I want to continue with what we had been discussing for the last few weeks. A few weeks back, I started a series of lecture series on searching for zero through journeying through time, going back and looking back the zeros that we have discovered, the early zeros, that the symbols were zero, representing zeros. Today, what I thought was to recap some of the things we had discussed and to look at to compare the Brahmi numerals found in India and then Brahmi numerals found in Sri Lanka. So those actually why we are comparing, because there are certain differences and certain similarities, and those have contributed to the evolution to the discovery of zero. So on your left, as usual, you have the pocket watch given to our King Rajadhiraj Singha by the Dutch. So let me go back, quickly recap on what we had done for the last few weeks. So I talked about zero and Hindu-Arabic numerals. So on top there are two. You have the Hindu-Arabic numeral, and then the bottom one you have the Eastern Hindu-Arabic numerals. So the one that you see, which is modern numeral set with a zero, basically came into existence somewhere in the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries. CE, Common Era. The one that what you are seeing in the bar at the bar and in the second line, the one that the Arabs today, in certain Arabic countries or in the Arabic script, they use this particular set with a dot as the zero. So we talked about this earlier. We talked about Mayans. So there are two civilizations that discovered the zero. As I told you earlier, the Mayans were one of them, and the Indian civilization. So when you say Indian civilization, it seems that uh, the civilizations, there are several parallel civilizations in this part of the world, like Sri Lanka, for instance. We also had a zero, and also that we also use zero. We know that we use zero, but I'll talk about later on how the zero had come into our script. So I kept a separate presentation on the how the linguistic zero had actually come into our script, and somewhere in the 4th and the 5th century. And so what you are seeing is Mayans. The Mayans, of course, use a vigesimal system, which is the base 20, and the shell-like thing is a zero. But we don't know that whether whether Mayans had used zero as a number, how they had done the calculations, how they used it basically for the multiplication, division, and adding. So the other thing is commonly that I think everybody must know, this the radix, and the radix is 10 here. So you can see that there is also, which is very important to understand this. And so what you see is the index zero has, so this is 1125. So we know 10 to the power 0, 10 to the power 1, 10 to the power 2, and 10 to the power 3. So these are called a positional notation. But actually the positional notation was discovered by the Babylonians, and which they inherited from Assyrians. So that's a very failure. Babylonians were about 6,000 years back, somewhere around 3000 BCE. So they would have known about the positional notation, and they were also skilled astronomers. And the astrology that we use today, especially the Western astrology, and some parts of actually to the Eastern astrology, to the Indian astrology too, that had come from Babylonia. So like the zodiac signs that we use and the constellations, that the signs that we zodiac sign, especially zodiac sign, the 12th zodiac sign. Actually, the Babylonians named them, and that had been used for right now almost 3,000 years. And the other interesting part about is they had used a base 60, suggestional numeral system. That's why you have a 60 minutes for an hour, 60 seconds for a minute. And of course, in Sri Lanka, we had 60 hours, the Sinhala hours, or this we call Sinhala pair, or the hour, or hora, or the hour in Sinhala. That means a hora means hour. So we use the 60 horas for a day. Our day normally for astrology, the day begins at the sunrise. So the previous day ends with the sunrise, and the new day begins at the same time with the sunrise. Okay, this Babylonian cuneiform that you are saying this, in fact, these are the number up to number 50, how they had recorded. And also the Persians also used for Persian. Today the ancient Persia used the Persian, and which was an Indo-European language, Indo-Arya subgroup, and they used cuneiform to record the numbers as well as the script. They had the script they used. Actually, they recorded with the cuneiform. So we talked about this. So there are two main shapes that we have identified as zeros. Number 0 came as basically as a dot, and also an oval shape 0, a circular shape, which is used in modern Hindu-Arabic numerals. So the dot is again the Eastern Hindu-Arabic numerals, and this dot appeared suddenly somewhere in something seemed to actually talk about in India. So it basically they associated with India in somewhere around 3rd century BC. I'm sorry, 3rd century CE, Common Era. So the interesting part about it is it's in a manuscript called Bakshali manuscript, which actually in Sharda, that is a script that was used later on. It became a Gupta script, and later on to Devanagari in the northern Indian part, North India. So this Bakshali manuscript, that you will see a dot. A dot is used somewhere in 3rd century CE, Common Era. But then there was a little issue came up. That is when they carbon dated it, it came to somewhere, 8th century, between 3rd and 12th century. So because of that, right now the most ancient zero was discovered in Cambodia, in Khmer. It's called the Khmer 0, Khmer dot. It's called the K127. So this is the Khmer 1, Khmer 0, which you have a dot, and this stela depicts the Shaka 605, or basically it's a beautiful 605. 605 actually. So this is what you see is this is a 6 and this 0, the positional notation. This is a 5, and use the 605. 605 means 683. You have to add 78 years, basically, for Shaka calendar. And it comes to 683 CE. So the second one comes within a 1 year of basically the one within 1 year from the Sri Vijaya kingdom, which is not far from Khmer. That's basically that you will see another dot. You can see the dot here, and that comes as a 606 within a 1 year. So it's a very similar, and it comes from establishment of the Sri Kshetra Park, and it's very similar to Khmer 0. right? So that basically, so we also have to now think about why that coming from this part of the world. We have not found much from India. However, that because they had probably they most of the zeros would have developed in India, or definitely developed in India, because we know that because these are in Sanskrit, so, and Malay and Sanskrit, old Malay and Sanskrit, and these inscriptions, and it would have come from India. But then these were basically on Ola leaves, which is very perishable, and so therefore they didn't last that long. Like the Bakshali manuscript also, I'm sure that was the original manuscript which was copied basically many times over the years, and that is how this carbon dating now had become an issue. So this is another. This is 608. It's a very interesting 8 here. You can see the 6, which is common, but you look at this round circular shaped basically the 0, which is again in 608. This is in old Malay, and this is called Kota Kapur inscription, and again comes from the Sri Vijaya kingdom. By the way, the Sri Vijaya kingdom is a Mahayana Buddhist kingdom, and Sri Lanka had quite a bit of engagements with the Sri Vijaya kingdom. For instance, our Parakram Bahu VI, the Sri Lankan King Parakram VI, who united for the last time the united the Sri Lanka, was actually grew up according to one of our famous archaeologists, Dr. Paranavitana, Professor Paranavitana, in this part of the world. So when he was very young. So this is Shaka year 608. So this actually comes from the Java. Again, this records the invasion that was undertaken by the Sri Vijaya kingdom against the island of Java. So this is the Bakshali manuscript. This is 3rd century, and it's carbon dated between the 3rd and the 8th century CE. So in India, so we are getting the earliest modern looking 0, circular. There are 2 recorded numbers, 270 and 50. So that was in Chaturbhuja temple in Gwalior fort. So because of this is called the Gwalior 0. It's around the 0 that we find today, the modern 0. And that's somewhere around 870 CE. Okay, now I want to quickly recap again on some of the numerals that we find in Sri Lanka. For instance, Sri Lanka also have had two sets of numerals. One is called Sinhala, which we have now encoded in single Unicode, and which didn't have a 0. And it is actually a multiplicative and additive system, very similar to, we'll come back to that later. And you can see on the left-hand side, this is actually from the Sinhala grammar written by Mohandiram Mendisgunasekar, and he had actually recorded these. And the last time we saw these numerals being used commonly was in 1815 in Sri Lanka, when we lost the independence, Sri Lankan independence to the British. So you can see the convention we signed with the British when we were handing over the Sri Lankan kingdom with the capture of the last king of Sri Lanka. So you will see this. So I'm just pointing to the convention, and there is 11 paragraphs. So this, on the left-hand side, you have the English, you have the Sinhala here, and the Sinhala ones actually being recorded, or the numbered with the Sinhala ilaka. We can see number 10 has basically a symbol for number 10, and you can see that number 20, 30, 40, 50 up to 90, and there's 100, and there's 1,000. By the way, this is actually a multiplicative and additive system. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And also that these shapes that I have taken, these shapes, in fact, I took it from the convention so that you have this line, it's which we had taken from the convention we signed. And this is from the Mendelssohn just for comparison. This is another very interesting thing. This the Dutch watch that you saw in my basically the presentation. At the beginning of the presentation, you can see this little watch here, the pocket watch, beautiful pocket watch, gold plated pocket watch given by the Dutch. And well, interestingly, these numbered. So I told you that there is a 60. So we had Sri Lanka earlier used the Sinhala Hora, or the Sinhala hours, 60 hours per day. And so this one I recorded with 30 hours here. So beautifully you can, if you go through it, you can see the like normal 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. You will have a 30. So you have a 10, there's symbol for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And this is also a multiplicative. I told you multiplicative additive. This is if you have the way you write 12, you have the 10 here, you put the 2 here, and that is 12. So then you have to add them two together. Then you have 25. So that again, you will see the 25 here. Now the multiplicative part. So if it is more than 100, or let's say 100, so you have 200. So by the way, remember this, I find it interesting when we compare this with the Brahmi numerals. Brahmi numerals also have 10, 20, 30, 40, there are symbols. However, when they write in Sri Lanka, when you write, the way that you position your the sign, your basically your 100 sign here, there's 100 and 1,000 sign, and the way that you place is actually a little bit different, right? So from the Brahmi. So anyway, what you have is that this is a 2025, this is a 255. So this one does not have a 0. And by the way, the Bible, the first Bible in Sri Lanka was actually at the page numbering, and the year was actually written in Sinhala. So in the palace is very common. And also these numerals, you can find them in Watadage. There is a on the floor. There are 4 Buddhist statues in the Watadage in Polonnaruwa, and the bottom that they had basically the floor. They have there were tiles. The tiles had been basically it's a tiles they have brought it from prefabricated, in the sense pre-fitted, and they were numbered and brought to and fitted them. So you see one of the Buddhist statues facing the Parakram Bahu's the main tank, the largest tanker in the ancient world, basically in Sri Lanka, and that facing that Parakram Samudra, the tank, man-made tank. Actually, the right there underneath of that, the tile is marked with number 1. Then there are others, like for instance, I saw very much old 70, 60 were actually marked there. So it's like Excel sheet. What they have done is there is a Sinhala number, and plus that they have brought basically the tile is marked with the number with the letter, like Excel sheet type of this thing, right? Then you have this Littilakam or astrological digits. This is something very interesting because in fact, we have encoded this in basic multilingual plane. It's a very important part of that is this has a 0, and it's a normal what we write decimals, like the way that you write. So but the 0 is the very interesting one. 0 is not an oval shape or dot or whatever. We would have used dot For zero in the ancient time, because that we use the word bindua. Bindua is actually which means a dot for zero. So there is a high possibility that we used it, but we use a halkirim, halanta. That means our linguistic zero is actually the zero, but actually the zero is the halanta, halant. Actually, we end it with a half zero on left-hand side, crossing over to that one, there is a half zero there. So actually that it is a kind of attaching a zero to our basically to our characters. And we'll talk about this later on. And there is a very interesting thing, the way that we write K and co, right? Just not a K, the long K with actually halanta. We're making zero linguistic operation. That means the removal of the inherent vowel, a sound. A sound, we have inherent consonants. All Indo-European or the Indo-Arya scripts or the consonants carry this inherent vowel, and the halant is actually for the virama, removes that the inherent vowel, a sound, and that basically is Panini's lop. So we call it lopa, and that's actually a mathematical operation, zero operation we call it, and that is done. So when you do that part, you can see the front vowel getting increased. So there is a pure consonant of k sound, a sound has been taken out. Then the a becomes uh, basically becoming long, the long a sound. So the long a sound that makes a similar thing like the way we write 1-0, presence and absence. It is absent, the sound is absent, that means a sound is absent, but there is a presence will be felt on the left hand side of the consonant. There's something is there. So the presence and absence. It's quite a bit of number of things that we when we speak, we have these extreme ends, right? Extreme ends. And the one is extreme ends. So that actually comes from this zero concept in our language. So anyway, we can call this a nullifier. So it is in astrological digits in astrological digits. So which is in right now, it has been encoded in our basic multilingual plane. So this is the Litilaka. Now, so you can see from Ola that we have taken somewhere on this particular Ola leaf, Ola book. We got it from, in fact, I went and when I searched for it, it was in the Canadian Museum. There are lots of Ola books with the Litilaka, somewhere around 1700s, even maybe earlier, even if you date it. And all the, other than anything about on the content, other than the Buddhist scriptures, they are in their pagination is done through the using the Litilaka. And also all the astrological books, which I have several the photographs that we have taken, images. I have the images of Litilakam writing literally thousands and thousands pages are there at the Candy Museum and the Colombo Museum. But the interesting one is these all belong somewhere, if you date it, they go back 1700, 1600. That's the maximum that you will see because these are very perishable. So they would have copied whatever the older versions, they would have copied from one copy, exact copy to the next. Basically, they would have copied it. They have mirror copied it. Basically, they are copied in the sense, copied, exact copy, and they would have kept it in one order. So that when you date it though, it will go to 1600, but they would have come from the ancient times. They would have basically copied and was actually kept it in temples and especially in temples. We saw the same prefabricated bricks in Sigiri Museum. This is Dr. Kusum Siri gave me because, in fact, I met him when I saw them at the following day. I had a long discussion with Dr. Kusum Siri at the time. He was the he was actually at that time he was basically the director of that museum, or the curator of the museum. So I met him and he showed me these ones, and you can see there's 81 on the bottom right hand side. There's a number 1 on the top. There is a 81 on the several 81s here. There's 0 also. That's halanta with this kind of like we call it kambua, like something circular shape, a front vowel kind of thing. Because this is a horizontal line had become cursive after 2nd or 3rd century in Sri Lanka. So you have the number 1. So this is today's actually the main topic. Is what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the Brahmi evolution in Sri Lanka. So let us talk about it. Now Brahmi, in fact, the most ancient Brahmi, that means Sri Lanka had prior to even our ancestor who came from North India, called Vijaya, the Prince Vijaya, we have been writing. Yeah, we have been writing for centuries. More than 2,500 years. So that's our the starting point of the Sinhala kingdom was it actually synchronized with the parinibbana, or the death of Buddha. So on the day that the Buddha passed, the Prince Vijaya landed in Sri Lanka. That's what our chronicles say. But we have found writing on potsherds about 900 BC, which is BCE. So the before Common Era, 900. And there were several ones that we have about very earliest writing in Sri Lanka and in Brahmi. We also have Brahmi written from like Kharoshthi, from right to left and left to right. So normally we write left to right. There are about 17 Brahmi inscriptions from right to left. Like Kharoshthi. Kharoshthi writes from right to left. Like Aramaic, right to left. Like Hebrew and Arabic. So in these inscriptions, right, rocky inscriptions, we see quite a number of numerals, Brahmi numerals. And actually from 100 to 400 CE, quite a number. And then that particular Brahmi numeral, if there is a number written in Brahmi numerals, they also write it in words. And so that's one of the, so that we can easily establish what actually these numbers are. So the point is on the left-hand side, which I have taken from basically there was so what you can see here on the left, number 1 we have not discovered in Sri Lanka. Number 10 had become vertical, not the horizontal like in India. Like this opening part, you can see the round part on the bottom, and the opening part because normally it's like when you take an infinity sign. Infinity sign, there are two kind of like knotted kind of two zeros actually going on one after another. So there is this opening on the right hand side, and that actually you can turn it 90 degrees. There will be a horizontal one which actually have opening. Normally that's what you find in India. Well, I don't agree that you don't see 90 here. 80 is also here. I think I have seen some, and I tend to think that those are actually 90 and 80. You can see 70, those a little bit different from the Indian 70. And 20 also is a kind of round in India, but in Sri Lanka, it's a sort of like a kind of apple or a pears or a pear. Other ones are very similar. 2, 3, there's a 3 horizontal lines. 4 is very similar to what you find. 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. that you find basically in India. So this is Situl Power inscription, which I got it from the Brigadier Munising's site. So well done. He had done a very interesting. He had taken out all of them. In fact, I would have had to take them out from the original inscription, but he had done it. So I want you to make a little note of it. So these are actually ligatures. These are 400. Then there's a 50, and there's a sign called Karisa or Karihi. So this sign actually tells you this is the kind of measurement of land, so that you can see it here. It's about 4 acres apparently. And so there is again a ligature here. This is a ligature. By the way, this is really interesting here. So this is a 4,000. These are 1,000 sign. By the way, our 1,000 sign is also a little different from Indian counterpart. So the 100 sign, 1,000 sign. We have 100, which is, I will show you 100 here. 100 is also a little bit slightly different. This is not here. There you can't see 100. Very nice 100. I can't see on its own. But this is 60 apparently. This is a 50 and this 60. Well, let me show you what happens. Now, what you saw was the ligatures. So by the way, this also looks like a very rudimentary, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4,000. Now you will see this in the Brahmi version of it. Brahmi, of course, there is a nice little ligature, 4,000. I'll show you. Sri Lanka never had any ligatures for over 1,000. I haven't seen it. So this even you can see these are in a separate, lined up. There are 4 like humans, and right. You can see these are here. So these are 4. The total. By the way, Brahmi in this instance is actually additive. So all this you had to add. So you add this between these two Karisa sign. 4,000 plus 400 and plus, so there are 70. So this is not a positional notation, but basically that you have to add. But here there is no ligature here. But 100 with the ligatures, you see, it's a very common. So the India also that you find the same ligatures. So the Brahmi would have been character, they basically thought that they were kind of like a characters, what we use for writing. So later on, it evolved into numerals. So that looks like that. But this one, now, by the way, Situl Power was between first CE, so between 49 and 59, kind of, 34, 44 actually, CE. However, there is a very, very advanced Brahmi numerals, the rock inscription called the Bakyala, right? And this one on the right hand side, you can see the 700. There is a Karisa sign. Then there is basically 100, this 100 sign and the 7. It's a multiple. So that means 7 times 100. So it's written also in a Sinhala Prakrit. So this is something is happening in Sri Lanka. Something very interesting happening in Sri Lanka. So now slightly over 100, any number over 100, becoming, when you want to depict it, it become a multiplicative rather than additive. So, I mean, there is also an argument, India also going through the same thing. Indian Brahmi is also going through the same thing, but it's a kind of little different because over 100, what you find that actually were ligatures. But here you have numerals. So let me look at this one now, 603, for instance. So there are the 100 sign, then there's a Harisa sign. There are 2 Harisa signs here. It's like a separating columns. There's a 1 column here, there's a 1 column here, right? There's something is happening here. Quite interesting. So we had to think about it, little differently. We have not analyzed this. I mean, Dr. Dr. Abhay Arya Singh has actually, in fact, I had a little bit of discussion with him. In fact, he was very old at the time I had the discussion over the phone about this. He was one of the discoverers of this. Dr. Senrat Parnavitan and the other person, our Professor Senrat Parnavitan. There's this interesting thing about this 603. So you can see that 6 and 3. And this kind of interesting is actually just to show you what kind of like this 100. So it's telling you like a column head. It's telling the index. Basically, it's saying, well, this is 600. You have to multiply that. And plus you would have to add the 3, but you don't have a column head here. You see? It is telling you a little bit slightly different. It doesn't have, because it's a 10 to the power 0. It's up to 9. Actually, the way they have done it is actually for that column. If you are doing that, I mean, let's say that you have 90, for instance, or 93 or something. You have a 3, then you have the 9, right? 90 sign, not the 9, 90 sign, and then that's adding 90 plus 3, 93. And then you have on the other hand side, you have a 6 and there's a 6 and 100. The 100 is here. So just to show that like how big this column, how large it is, right? The quantity wise. So this is from Dakina. So by the way, this actually came from Dakina Stupa. There are 17 slabs. There are several slabs I can talk about a little bit later. I think there are a lot of basically inscriptions in Sri Lanka until for about 300 to 400. And the 400 after that, you basically the numbers disappear from your inscriptions. Actually, you don't find them at all except Katapaya there. And sometimes everything is written in words, right? But there are a lot of numerals would have been there on Ola. We don't see them. We call there a dark ages because the rock inscriptions are not there. Lesser rock inscription for about 400 years. However, the numerals completely disappear from our rock inscriptions after that. So here is another one. There is a 900, again 900, 9 and 100. Again, the two chi sign as a separator. Very interesting, separated. So we are very interesting, right? What our scribes have been doing. And a 4 here. So basically, again, you add it, 904. Here is 420. There's a 20 sign here. Again, Dakina Stupa. Right. So what I did was, I wanted to find out what really is going through in Sri Lanka at the time. So we know that, we also know, you can see, remember that Sinhala Ilakka? Now, if you look at the Sinhala Ilakka, the number of multiplication, the number by which that you will multiply comes to the left-hand side. And the number that you have, the 100 sign goes to the right-hand side. That's how you have done, but it's a slightly different here, right? So now, so I use the cave inscription. It's actually Buddhist, Jain, Hindu, all that in that cave called Nanagat inscription in Maharashtra, India. There are large numbers had been discovered. For instance, the scribe had drawn 24,400 with ligatures of 24,000 by 24,000 by creating a conjunct numeral symbol for 20,000, combining two symbols, 1,020. You are done for then you create 20. Likewise, you see here, 4,000 is by combining 1,004 and a 400 with a combination symbol representing 104. They're basically 104, kind of like you can see it here also, a little slightly. Here, you can see the 400 here, right? So 500, you can see this one. Some parts of 400 here, and this is a ligature. So these are also that you have one here, so then two other, these ones. So to make it 300, this is a 200 with a 1, and this is a 1. So this is 1,000 with a similar time period. This is a 250 BCE. So here is again the Ashoka, I think Gupta period or something. There's a 256. Okay, now let us look at this. I want to show you something very interesting. So this is what you have is 20. So here is a ligature 20. So we don't have a separator sign, you see, like what you find in Sri Lanka. And there is a 4,000 here. This is 1,020. You have a 20,000. 1,004, 4,000. This is ligature again. This is 400. This is 12. There is some more here. We look at the 289. I think it's very interesting. This is a 200. You can see there's a little slight, curve. And this is the 80, which supposedly you don't see it in Sri Lanka. This is 7. 7 is kept the same for years to come starting from Brahmi. So this is another 11,000 here. So I have given quite a bit for you to look at. And then what I have, it's a very ingenious way of actually creating numbers, large numbers. There is no positional notation. They don't have basically 0. So you have to have symbols. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 99. That's for the additive form. By the way, in Sri Lanka, so now you look at the thing. So what happens is here is a ligature that you do. That sign is created. Unique sign is created for 20,000. And then you have a second one. You have a 4,000, again, unique sign. And then you have basically 400. So you add it. So it's actually like it works as an additive system. Although this little ligature actually is multiplication is going on. But you compare to Sri Lanka, you can see that Sri Lanka has numerals. Basically, you have 4 there, 100 there, then you have 420. So it's a little more advanced. It's like about second, actually this is a second century, somewhere in the second century. So you will see this. So we have interesting part about it is our ligatures. You saw in the Situl power, but they're the same in parallel, even earlier ones. We were actually establishing multiplicative system. So now the Brahmi is becoming multiplicative and additive system in Sri Lanka. But in India also to some extent, but it's not exactly like a fully blown multiplicative additive system. Instead, you have a ligature zana. We don't do any ligatures. Suddenly, from the 1st century onward, we don't see ligatures in Sri Lanka. In fact, I think by 2nd or the 3rd century, as they disappear from our rock inscriptions, I think it has transformed into, because in Dambulugal inscription, for instance, you will have the other way, like what the Sinhala has. The other way in the sense they're separate as they use the kahapana, which is a coin type of thing. That's right. They are basically I call the column head goes to the right hand side, and the multiplying number comes to the left hand side. So it's like a evolution of Sinhala is taking place. Look at this one. So I want to give you this. Look at this one. You have a 1,000. You can have a 10. You have all of that, right? Right. So there are somewhere around early 2nd centuries, even in the 1st and the 2nd century CE, into basically it goes through like several steps. In fact, Nasik numerals that you find in these caves, actually this is something to do with the Buddhist. These are Buddhist caves, and then the giant caves, right? There's something is going through, basically that these actually become later on into Devanagari, which actually comes up with the decimals, later with the 0. So so let us go through this. So we have a Halkirim as our 0, and then that appears somewhere in the 4th century in the Manigdana Stupa in Dambulla, and suddenly they come, suddenly appears. It's not like out of the blue. And you see the evolution is happening in Sri Lanka. So in ours also becoming strictly very much into multiplicative and additive system. So it's a fairly important time in Sri Lanka. And also the Kharisa sign becomes a separator. So in Sri Lanka, there is this separation of columns, but in India, for instance, 250 BCE, you will see the separation by just space between the three. So what I did was I put so in Sri Lanka, you will see the numerals, not the ligatures. And anyway, over 1,000, we had not had any ligatures. You saw the Situlpava inscription. Our scribe didn't know how to write it, actually, in fact. But then, so let us look at whether this. So the problem comes now. Did we not know about the writing, or in Sri Lanka, didn't we know that big numbers, how do you write, right? I mean, they may not write, they may have not written bigger numbers. No, that's not true. So I have done all of this. Now you can see here 24,400, 6,001, either 10 to the power. This is Situlpava inscription in Sri Lanka. He's at 1,700. So in Sri Lanka here, you can see that I've told you that there are no insert ligatures, numerals, and with the Kharisa sign. So that's a very, very interesting. So the Kahapana 4,000. So now here is the coin 4,000. So we said we may not have the 4,000. No, we have. So they have done it. Again, you have the symbol. Then there's this, the kind of like the sign, 1,000 sign, and then the 400, right? So what happened during this kind of like a dark ages, especially they would have written on Ola there, so that these are becoming cursive. And what was going through actually? So so I think by 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, Sinhala Ilakkam actually evolved. It looks like they had gone with this Damulugala inscription kind of thing. This is called a let me see. Vila Weber inscription with the Brahmi Numerals Kahapana 4,000. Again, this is somewhere in 1st or 2nd century CE. Here you can see that this is actually is here, right? Okay. So what happened from the Indian numerals? We have a Nasik numerals, then to Nagari and Nagari and Devanagari. In Sri Lanka also that you find Nagari script. That's somewhere around very late, right? 700-800 kind of Devanagari. So I saw many Devanagari literally in Sri Lanka. Then what I did was now suddenly the zero comes to play. I will talk about this in another presentation where the Buddhism, so you saw that all these dots coming in actually in a Buddhist countries. Halanta comes in, Halkirima, we have a linguistic zero. All of that comes in actually in a Buddhist countries. There is a reason behind that. We will talk about that. And also it comes into our script also, zero. So suddenly this zero appears in Sri Lanka. So this Littilaka, 4th century CE. So now you can see what's going on. So this column head disappears. This radix is 10. Now, so what I've done is that 24,000, I put it here, basically so 10 to the power 2. These are 3 columns. 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 4. 20,000, 400, and I'm sorry, to 24,400. So how do you write in? So suddenly what happened, somebody had discovered in this dark age where that you have a lot of Ola, suddenly, so if you put now 10 to the 0, 10 to the 1, 10 to the power 1, 10 to the power 2, 10 to the like that. So if you put it in like up to 9, the first one, you put a 0. You put a 10 to the 1 also 0. But here, 10 to the power 2, yes, there are 4. 4 times 10 to the power 2 now. This one is also 4 times 10 to the power 3. 2 to the power 10 to the power 4. So you have a 24,400. So the 0 comes in somewhere, maybe Aryabhatta, maybe, by 600, of course, Brahmagupta had already defined by 600, and you start seeing uh, many zeros coming in with the dots. Obviously, Brahmagupta Sputa Siddhant had already been written in somewhere around 627, right? So people knew about zero operations. They treated it as number. So in Sri Lanka too, that we had treated number zero as a number, and we have used it for our calculations. By the way, now look at Sri Lanka. I just want to give a Dakina Stupa. You can see that here, by the way, 100. So that 0, 0, 1. So if you take out these, you just put whatever the one only without the top head. Here they remove this. They remove this 1000 part. That's like a column head. But we know that is 10 to the power 3. There's the 10 to the power 1. So here we have basically in Sri Lanka 1100. Okay. So I will end with a very interesting this one. I just want to show that there's something about a mystery. I told you suddenly the zero is appearing. Zero comes in suddenly. So there is I have not, I can't find so I know that in Sri Lanka, we had the Brahmi numerals, and the Brahmi numerals are fairly advanced, and they have become, unlike India, quickly they had become transformed into a multiplicative and additive system, which would have given rise to Sinhala Ilakkam, and also the Tamil Ilakkam, if you look at Tamil numerals, if you look at it. Tamil numerals, of course, they don't have a zero. They have a zero, by the way, encoded. However, they don't actually use it for writing 10. So there's a symbol for 10. There's a 10 symbol for 100. There's a symbol for 1000. All these three, they will write large numbers. But in Sri Lanka, Sinhala Ilaka, as I told you, it's a direct evolution. They had not thought about it. So I think Tamil would have come a little bit, numerals would have evolved from Brahmi a little bit later than the Sinhala. Sinhala would have much earlier. So by second, third of the 4th century, we would have had, because we don't have attestation for that. We can't attest that this had actually happened. But we know the Manigdana, you have the zero, Halante, Halkiri. By 1300, Pujavali, the great work of Mayurapadasthivira, talks about large numbers, many zeros behind one. So it's going to 10 to the power 138. Massive numbers, right? 100, yeah, large numbers like in India. So, but then the funny thing is about this too. We have the dot, we have the halanta. In fact, same Mehndis Gunasekara says, why don't you remove the halanta, right? Which I saw, I found it in a magazine called Grantavya. Grantavya, yeah, magazine where that talks about Litilakam. So they said that, you replace halant with a modern zero or the dot. So that's fine because it's a very similar operations. But the shapes that makes me really wonder. Very similar shapes. Something had happened. We have this Brahmi evolution, right? At the same time, in our script, zero, the linguistic zero, plays a huge role. It's a very important role. There is an impact is huge. So here you have Khmer, Thai, and Lao. We have a direct, basically, the ships used to sail from Sri Lanka, from our free ports to Sri Vijaya. That's also a trading post. And we had a lot of, exchange of goods, knowledge, and our monks used to travel to Southeast Asia to be there. So there is something about, very seriously, we may have to look at and think when you look at the shapes of 605, we are looking at the 6 and 5, we are wondering whether there is some kind of a connection between Khmer and the ancient Sri Lanka. So anyway, we had to basically aware that I will end with a question mark. The next time I'll talk about the scripts, Sinhala script, and even Thai and all of that. I'm actually in these operations. A linguistic zero operation, linguistic zero, how it operates, LOPA. That's what I'll be discussing next time. Thank you very much. And so we will talk about linguistic zero again. Why don't you write to me? I have given my email address, wijayawardhana@gmail.com. Please write to me. So we will have a dialogue about what we had discussed today. Thank you.